Hello, everybody. I want to be respectful of the time that you all set aside to join in today. I think both of you have had me well, I'm certain both of you have had me in classes before, and you both know that during the time that comes close to spring break and fall break, I try and do a couple of things to emphasize career opportunities and and what students should be mindful of as they prepare themselves for careers in both the homeland and national security communities. This semester is no different, and as a matter of fact, I would say that has never been more important than this semester. And the reason why I say that is because at the federal level, and we'll talk about federal clearances in this brief session, uh, opportunities are beginning to expand quite significantly in the homeland, national, and intelligence communities, and national security communities, and homeland security communities, and also the fields of intelligence and all types of disciplines tangentially related to those areas of careers. This is due in no small part to the intensive reduction that was put in place at the federal level at the beginning of last year. And just like in previous administrations, there's been a massive re-expansion in terms of homeland and national security. That's always the cycle of things. And so what that means is that there has never been a time when there's been this much expansion in terms of career pathways and opportunities in all three of those career fields. This is an important time, and I think that makes this presentation much more poignant for everyone. We'll go ahead and dive right in. Again, I like to be respectful of your time, and at the end of it, I'll just pause for any questions that you all might have. By the way, I am recording this. I am going to post this to uh, our Facebook site. However, the people who take the time to join in live, you all know that I will hook you up. So I'll just leave it there. Okay, so let's get started. Obtaining a and some of and you guys may have heard me talk about this before, but hopefully, I know Ms. Rios. I think one time it was just you and me during a presentation. So, but this is important stuff. Uh, you cannot have a career in the homeland, or national security community, or homeland security community, or the intelligence community without a security clearance. That's just the way it is. And so, uh, in effect, when you are applying for a job in the federal government, you're applying for in one of these communities, you're applying for two things. One, you're applying for the job, and two, you're applying for the trust, which is the clearance. You're applying for the government to trust you to handle confidential, secret, and top secret material. And I can tell you that the application process for security clearances uh, can be far more extensive than applying for the regular job. And the way it works is you obtain you obtain the job offer. You apply for the job through USA Jobs. Hopefully, you have looked at the information I've sent out to everyone regarding USA Jobs this week. So you apply for the job, you make the certification list, and then you get the interview, and then you get the job. Uh, but you're only halfway there, because after you get the job, unless you already have a clearance, which is the case in many instances, you now have to apply for the security clearance. And you have a tentative offer in hand, and that's a real job. But everything hinges on your being able to obtain the security clearance. And again, that mostly involves levels of access at three predominant levels: confidential, secret, and top secret. Uh, the U.S. government intelligence community uh, basically evaluates people on one singular concept: can you be a person who is reliable to obtain a position of trust? The areas that they look at are, you see there on the screen, drug use, foreign travel. It used to be foreign travel used to be only foreign travel that was of an official nature. Now they look at foreign travel that's both official and unofficial. They look at social media posts. They look at your financial background. They do the standard criminal background check. They look at any contact you've had with non-U.S. citizens. I should emphasize that that's always been the case. I know that in this day and time, that concept is amplified in other areas, but it's always been the case that they look at any contact you've had with anyone outside the United States. And then they look at every place you've lived since you've been born. You have to put down the known address of every place you've lived since you've been born. And that's only if you've never had a security clearance before. So these are all things that are mandatory. I can tell you from people who I used to conduct these types of investigations on behalf of the military and also on federal civilians as well. And I can tell you that my contacts who still do this tell me that the two things that trip up people more than anything these days are social media posts and finances, because they do look at your credit report and any financial issues, because having financial issues, especially unresolved financial issues, are considered threats to our national security. Background checks for the U.S. government used to be conducted by the Office of Personnel and Management. This is transitioned to the Defense Cooperation Security Agency, or also known as the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency. It goes by both names. But basically, the DCSA conducts background checks on all federal and military personnel who have applied for clearances with the federal government. What happens is you apply for the clearance after you obtain the tentative job offer, and then DCSA carries out the background investigation based on all the factors I showed you on the screen before. And then they send that background investigation to the agency that hired you. So let's say you applied for a position with the CIA, and the CIA sends off your investigation package to DCSA. They conduct the standard background investigation, and then they send the completed investigation to the CIA. And then the CIA has to do what we call an adjudication, and that is a final decision based on the information that they see in your background investigation. Sometimes information comes up in the background investigation, I should say, that they may come back to you for more information regarding clarification and so forth. And that's not anything to be worried about. And I should also say that sometimes, not every time, but sometimes a security clearance investigation involves a polygraph investigation and a psychological examination. Those two things are not always the case. It depends on what agency you choose to go work for at the federal level. I can tell you that the majority of agencies don't require polygraphs or psych exams. However, some do, and it's just important to keep that in mind. The federal government is beginning to transition to what they call the Continuous Evaluation Program. The CEP is basically designed to look at people on a continuous basis, continuing to check people out, mostly on background. It's stuff you never see or notice, and it's something that's done regardless of your clearance status. It's basically a program that's been put in place that they're trying to have replace the standard background investigation, just to continuously evaluate people. That's not quite in place yet, but it's something that the government is trying to move toward. So how does the background investigation work? Well, once you receive the tentative job offer, you have to fill out what we call the SF-86, or today it's called the EQUIP, the electronic questionnaire that's the electronic version, the eQuip, which is the electronic version of the SF-86. The SF-86 is a detailed questionnaire that's about 27 pages in length that includes questions related to everything I talked about in the previous screen, those reportable items. Places you live, it asks you for people you've known, people you've lived with, the names of your immediate family members, and so forth and so on. It's very important not to be offended by the information that is asked of you on the SF-86. This is something that people have been asked about ever since the end of World War II, who want to obtain a security clearance. That's just the way it is. They want to know who you are and who the people are who have been in your life. It can be intrusive. They do want to know about your immediate family. And again, the important thing is that when they start to ask you about foreign contacts and where you've been and that sort of thing, just give them the information to the best of your knowledge. And the most important thing on the SF-86 is just to be accurate as much as you know. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be complete. And that's the important thing. And just be as truthful as you can. And most of the time, that works out fine for people. Sustainability of the program depends on two things: eligibility and suitability. Those are two things that are used to determine whether or not a person is worthy of access to classified material. So in the Homeland Security community and also the national security and intelligence communities, eligibility and suitability are the two standards that are used to conduct background investigations. And as I told you before, after the investigation is complete, it goes to what you see in the final bullet there called assessment and adjudication. Adjudication is normally carried out by the agency or the command that hired you in the federal government. And again, if they have any questions, any follow-up questions for you, they'll come back to you and say, hey, can you clarify some things that we're just not sure about? And that's, the basic rule of thumb. Just give them information as best you know it. I can tell you that even though this sounds daunting, or it can sound daunting, people prying into your financial background, who your family is, that sort of thing. It's really not a big deal as long as you are forthcoming with the information. This is something that's been done, again, since the end of World War II, when the official process was set up via the National Security Act in 1947 to implement access to classified material standards. Before you fill out the SF-86, go ahead and do a life inventory. Gather together all the information that you possibly can before you sit down to fill out the electronic form. The agency that hired you will send you a link to fill out the online form. It's just like any other online thing that you've done to, maybe apply for access to a database or something like that. And they just ask you for all the information related to where you've lived, where you've worked, people who've known you, both friends and family. Usually they ask for people who've known you both professionally and personally at various points. And they understand, like, if this is your first clearance and you're being asked for information back to birth, they understand that you don't have a professional background, before, leaving high school or college. They know that. Just give them the information as best it fits into the categories that they're asking for. But again, it's very important for the information to be complete and not to assume that even though it's something on the form it's something you have to provide, that it's something you don't have to give. The other thing is to make sure that all the information is as accurate as it can be. You may not be able to recall, for example, specific people in your family, especially large families, and that's okay. Just there's a section in there for explanation. You may have lost contact with someone who used to be an intimate family member, and that's fine. But if you can obtain their contact information if it's being asked for, um, it's good to have that. But I can assure you that they will. Let me just give you an example, a personal example. When I obtained my first security clearance in 1989, um, I hadn't seen my dad at that point in about 12 years. So I had no idea where he was. All I had was his name, and that's all I provided. And that was okay. I just explained that on the form. But they do want to know like who your parents were, any siblings that are not were but are any siblings and so forth, and where they can be reached. And again, it sounds intrusive. It kind of is, but it's really not a big deal. And just keep in mind that everyone who works in the federal government, everybody in the military who has a clearance, they've all been asked this information. They want to know about citizenship information with regard to yourself and your family members, where you've lived. If it's a reinvestigation, sometimes it only goes back 10 years. But if it's your first clearance investigation, keep in mind that it goes back to birth. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be as accurate as you can with regard to foreign contacts. Foreign contacts doesn't mean anybody you've ever had contact with outside the country. The catchphrase that's used in the investigation community is close and continuing contact. So if there's someone that you met who's from overseas and you've maintained close and continuing contact, even up to the present day, that's probably someone that should go on the form. They also want to know about any criminal history and anything related to any potential recreational or drug or substance abuse in your background. And again, just be forthcoming about that. It's always good just to get it out there and get ahead of it. And then during the course of the investigation, just answer the questions that come up. I can tell you that with regard to drug use, that agencies are far more lenient with that than they ever have been. I was working with a hiring manager who was in charge of the HR security process for a very important agency in Washington, D.C. And he told me about, maybe this was 2 years ago, that his standard is he only, when the way he looks at recreational drug use, not drug use that had become a problem, but recreational drug use, as his cutoff is, have you used within the last 7 months? That's what they want to know. So if they see that you put drug use on your SF-86, then when the agency comes back to you for the one-on-one, because part of the investigation always involves a face-to-face, they want to know if it's been within the last 7 months. Now, if it's something that was a problem for you, that may fall into a different category. The reason why I tell you that the federal government has become far more lenient these days is because when I first obtained my security clearance in 1989, drug use of any kind, no matter how far back it went, was an automatic disqualification for you obtaining a security clearance. So just keep in mind that things have become more lenient, but again, drug use is still forbidden, even marijuana, because it's still illegal at the federal level. But just be honest and forthcoming, and most of the time, what they're trying to see in the background investigation is whether or not the truth is told. Um, uh, Keep in mind about some common mistakes that are often made when filling out the SF-86 and or the the electronic form. Um, if you have used any nicknames, and I mean nicknames in terms of in ways that you put this on official documents, just put all aliases and nicknames that you've been known by. Okay. If you have any significant gaps in terms of like history where you've lived, that sort of thing, that can become an issue. These things will be investigated. These aren't disqualifications, but listen, let me give you an example. If for some reason you just, inadvertently or just couldn't figure out how to account for, 3 years in your life somewhere. That gap is going to be investigated, and they will find out where you've been and that sort of thing. So just recall as best you can. Also, omitting foreign travel, even unofficial foreign travel, in other words, vacations or just leisure travel, please include as much of that as you can, as best you can recall. Again, they understand that, if this is your first clearance, you might have trouble recalling every single place you've been overseas. Some people have never been overseas, but just do the best you can and don't intentionally not put foreign travel on your SF-86. A good rule of thumb I tell students is never too early. And even when I was working in the military, when I was active duty military before I retired and then became a civilian at the federal level, I tell everyone the same thing. Just keep a notebook, just a regular notebook of every place you've been in terms of foreign travel. And this includes, by the way, cruises that you might go on. And keep a notebook of every place you've ever lived in the States. That way, when the time comes for you to recount all that, it's not a large level of effort for you to recall all that information, and it makes the investigation process go a lot smoother. Just be honest. If there's information on the SF-86 or the electronic form that you feel like might not be as clean as you'd like, just explain the context. Again, people understand. We're all human. We all live lives. People have had different types of challenges and experiences. When I've conducted background investigations on folks, people have had divorce, people have had divorces, people have had financial situations. I knew one young lady who she was worried that both her father and her brother were at the time of her investigation in federal prison. Now that was looked at, but it didn't have anything to do with her. So I just told her, I said, make sure you include that information because when she put there, sometimes it may ask for the current or known address of an immediate family member, such as a sibling or a parent, and she had to put their prison address. And she was worried about that. But I said, look, just put it. It has nothing to do with you. It's just, you're just being forthcoming and honest. And sure enough, it was no big deal. She sailed right through and she got her top secret clearance. Just keep in mind that when you fill out the SF-86, it is an official government document. And like all government documents, if you intentionally falsify that, that can be punishable under U.S. law. Also keep in mind that your SF-86 is your first official act in submitting that. Think of that as your first official piece of work for the federal government. Don't think of it as, oh, this is a big deal and, I'm having to go through all. Just think of it as your first official piece of work for the federal government. And that they're looking at who you are, they're evaluating your character and all that stuff. But just think of it as your first piece of work for the federal government. And I think that's probably the best way to keep your mind in a good place about it. It is a big deal because it's used to evaluate whether or not you can obtain access to classified information. At the end of the day, that's what it's used for. But just be honest and forthcoming and explain anything on there that might not be as clean as you'd like. And most of the time it works out. I can tell you that during my career, I have worked through some investigations, and some people had some serious issues going on. And my counsel and advice was always the same: just be straightforward. And I would say most of the time, because they were forthcoming and they added context to the situation, it all worked out. When you submit the EQIP form online, again, the EQIP is, once you are hired by the agency, they'll send you the link to fill out the form. They'll give you a certain time frame to get it done. Please abide by that time frame. Once you submit it and it's validated and certified, then someone will follow up with you probably a few weeks later for a one-on-one interview who represents the agency I talked about before, the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, or DCSA. And when they sit down with you after your EQIP has been submitted, they'll have your electronic submission in front of them, along with all the initial information that's been gathered from your background investigation so far. And they may have some questions for you to help fill in the gaps. And these interviews are always in person. A couple of things to wrap up with. Just keep in mind that what the purpose of personnel security is for with regard to evaluating someone for a security clearance. It is designed to decide who has access to classified information, some of the most important, most secret information that our nation depends on. That's what it's all about. It's not really about you or me or any of our colleagues. It's about keeping the country safe. And that's what personnel security is all about. Keep in mind that even after you obtain your security clearance, as of right now, and this may change based on I told you earlier about the continuous evaluation program. But right now, even after you obtain your security clearance and you're good to go, you still have to be reinvestigated. And this is everybody every several years, depending on what type of clearance you have. If you have a confidential clearance, it's every 15 years. If you have a secret clearance, it's every 10 years. And if you have a top secret clearance, you are reinvestigated every 5 years. The reinvestigation doesn't take as long as the initial investigation when you first get your clearance. But keep in mind that even after you obtain your security clearance, you still are reinvestigated by the federal government based on the level of clearance you have. And for some clearance levels that are above top secret, I'm talking about the super duper secret stuff, people are evaluated on an annual basis. But that's not really relevant to what we're talking about. So that concludes the presentation. I will pause the recording or stop